Today we'll be installing the ECS tuning valved exhaust on my S4. Got the exhaust laid out on the ground here. Looks like a really nice kit, good materials. Got the resonated version, comes with an X pipe. It's valved, like I mentioned, so it comes with these little keys and all the equipment to hook up the valved exhaust. Not sure how that's done. I'll have to look at the instructions and figure that out as we go. Comes with a boost tap, I think goes underneath the supercharger in the back by the valve body. Comes with the hardware, little clip. Of course, the clamps and the tips that I want for, really like these. So these tips, they're the black tips. They got the ECS tuning on them. These are gonna look really good sticking out the back. All right, let's get started with the install. So I'm gonna take off the exhaust first, and we got this all laid out here, so we'll probably just start putting it on piece by piece, starting from the front and work our way back. Of course, whenever you're installing an exhaust, the alignment's gonna be a little bit tricky. There's a lot of variation in each one of these pieces, how it's turned and how far you push them in. So put the clamps on, but leave the clamps totally loose when you're installing an exhaust like this. So that allows you to still slide things around and get the tips totally aligned, get everything perfectly aligned, and then you slowly start tightening everything down. First thing we'll do to remove the stock exhaust is to remove the skid plate here. This is good timing for me because I just did the oil filter housing gasket. You can see that there's oil everywhere from that change. So I'll be able to clean all this up nicely and see if my oil filter housing replacement actually fixed my oil leak. So removal of this plate is a little bit different for the stock plate. Just go around and remove the screws all the way around on the plate and it'll come down. It's pretty straightforward. I finally have all 6 of these downpipe bolts removed on both sides. The light in here. So this side's easy. The driver's side is easy. The passenger side, these bottom 2 are pretty easy, but this top one is like impossible. It's very difficult to get to. You can't get to it from underneath. You won't get enough leverage. You have to go up through the engine bay to get to it. So let me show you the setup that I had for that. So to get to that top bolt, I had to use a wobble extension, this other wobble extension here, and then I had to go into a different tool set that I have to get a shorter socket. So I was using this Milwaukee socket and it's just a little bit too long here, so I wasn't able to get the angle. I was trying to do it with the 1/4 inch socket, but I kept breaking the extensions and the tools, so I needed to use this 1/2 inch one, and it was on there like this, barely on there because it's a really tight space, and then I had to use this extension here and remove the intake hose and then get to it from up here. So it's very difficult to get to, and you have to have the perfect setup to be able to get that right angle to get this on there and have it sit flush. 5 bolts snapped off on me, so they're rusted on there, they're fragile, they just snapped clean off. All right, to get the rest of this exhaust off, you start with these clamps here. Luckily, it looks like someone replaced these for me, so they're nice and easy to get off. As you can see, I have one side off here already, and then they just drop down up front and slide forward, and then we'll take off this brace next. With that brace removed, now we can go around and remove the exhaust hangers. So there's a 13mm bolt, so you can remove these 2 on the rear. And then you can remove this one in the center and this one over here. You have to be kind of strategic with this. Probably going to leave the ones on the rear, take these off first, so I can use my knees and legs to brace exhaust on this side, and then my arms to hold it as I drop them back there. All right, the stock exhaust is out. You can see on these bolts now which one's sheared off. So this one sheared, this one, and this one. So only 2 made it through. The rest of the exhaust removal really wasn't bad. I removed these clamps, then these mounts here, and the mounts in the back. So now we can transfer these mounts over to the new exhaust. There's a tool that makes this very easy. Show you guys what it is. So this tool here, you can get this off Amazon. I'll put a link in the description. You can put one side onto there, the other side on the back, and just squeeze it, and it makes taking these mounts off super easy. So if you're gonna do this, I recommend you grab one of these. I like to do the mounts one at a time so that I don't get confused with the orientation. You might switch that around or mix sides up. So I take it right off and bring it over and put it on the new exhaust. One thing I really like about ECS is their online instructions. So this is going to tell us how to go through and do the boost tap. So for this boost tap, it comes with a couple different options here. There's 2 ports to get the boost reading off of. We're going to plug one of these with this guy, so we only need one. And then we're going to use the smaller of the 3 options here for this hose. So I test fitted the hose that came with the exhaust with this. This is the right size. So we're gonna put one of these in here, and we're gonna put the plug on this one. It comes with some thread sealant. So you put thread sealant on these before you put them in, help seal everything up in here. And then we go over to the car and we take off this piece on the back of the supercharger. Show you what that looks like. So I took off the plastic cover here, and we're taking off this piece right here. So there are 4 bolts here, and looks like 3 bolts on the back. So we're gonna put the boost tap in here, have the elbow off, so it's the 2 bolts, 3, and I had to use an extension just to get under a little bit and pry on the elbow. It was stuck on there pretty good. It left the gasket behind on this side here. So now we remove this piece here and replace it with the boost tap. So you can see the similarities here. So we take this guy off, he's stuck on there a little bit, and then put that new one on. All right, just like that. This thing's ready to go back on. One more thing I forgot to mention earlier, to get this bolt out, it's a little difficult to get around this hose. So you can take this off of this mount here, it pulls right up, and then you can pull that out of the way. So let's get this thing bolted back up, and then we can figure out how to route this hose all the way back to the trunk, where we're going to have the controller and hook the controller up to power. The torque spec for all of these bolts is 10 Newton meters. So I have the hose hanging down there, routed alongside the back of the engine. I'm gonna follow this wire here. You can see pointing with my foot, and I'll follow it back. I took all the cover bolts off here. So there's let's get the light in here. So that's the hose, the wires I'm gonna follow, and I'm going alongside here. There's some brake lines in there that you can follow a little bit farther back, and we can get all the way back to the rear, around here over towards the wheel, and then back through. So we'll be able to get all the way back to the exhaust. All right, we got the hoses ran here. So this is the one from the front of the car, goes here with the check valve, and this one is going out under the car. This one will go to the exhaust. Then I got this bolted up here, and the electrical component will plug in back here, and we'll run it underneath over to here. All right, so that's the line running out of the trunk. I'm going to fit the new exhaust before I cut that line into place. We have to cut it, put a T fitting in there, do one line to the driver's side muffler and one line to the passenger side muffler. So instead of guessing on the right sizes and cutting that up, we're gonna fit the mufflers in the full exhaust and then cut that. All right, so for throwing the exhaust on, we'll just start from the front here and work our way back one component at a time. We'll leave all of the clamps loose so that we can move things around, get everything positioned perfectly, and then we'll go through and tighten everything down. The exhaust is on and all bolted up. Really wasn't too bad. You just start from the front and leave everything loose, come back here and slowly start to tighten things up. So the front like to pull apart a little bit. So push everything forward, make sure everything's seated right, and start to tighten things down slowly. Make sure it's not twisted or anything like that. So you just slowly go back. Then step back a little bit and start to position the tips. So the tips are very tricky. They sit on there very loosely. So tighten the clamps on the tips quite a bit and get them to sit on, and then slowly start to tighten everything up to get the mufflers to sit right and the tips to look good. Before you put the tips on, get the vacuum hose line running for the valves. So you have a line coming out of the trunk here, up here. So you can see zip tied over here. Got a line going into the trunk. There's also a line coming out of the trunk. I have it running behind this heat shield here. So I took off the 2 bolts for this heat shield right there and there and pulled it back. And I have the line running back here. Then you can start to see that line up there. I have it draped over the frame on the car there to keep it away from the exhaust. But you have your line coming out of the trunk to a T-fitting, and then from that T-fitting you have one line going over to this muffler and one line going over to that muffler. And I have the line here, you can see the T-fitting here. So that little brass piece up there, that's the T-fitting. You can see the line coming from the trunk area, and then it splits off to this muffler and the other muffler. So I have it running behind the diffuser to go to the other muffler, and then over the frame on that side to keep it away. So you can see here I have it zip tied to this frame. They give you just enough line to run this. It's exact. There's no line to waste, and it's kind of snug up here. These tips are actually a pain. So the head on these bolts is pretty small, and you have to snug these down a lot to remove the play. It took me a lot of cranking down on this to get these to stop wiggling. They have these weird clamps that are rounded on them, so there's a lot of play there. But overall, once I got these tightened down and kind of nudged this up, got everything tightened down, the fitment is actually really good. It's not touching anything under there. These tips lined up perfectly. I wasn't fighting with it to get it to align perfectly. So hats off to ECS for making a well-designed system. So here's what those lines look like in the trunk. Have this one coming from the front of the car, this one going out to those exhausts, comes down and around to that T-fitting, and then one line goes across here to this muffler, the other line goes around to that muffler. So now I'm working on getting a power source for this valved exhaust switch. If you look at all of these fuses in here, so use a multimeter to check these fuses for ignition live switch. So that's one where when the car is off, there's no 12 volt source coming from a fuse, but when you turn the car on, there's 12 volts. So with the multimeter, you just put the positive on one of these. So you put the positive on one of the fuse terminals here, either side, and then the negative over here. What I found is all of these had 12 volt source, always, even if the ignition was off. So I did a little bit of research online. I found somebody that was able to get the 12 volt source from this relay here, this 645 relay. It goes right down here. So I tried it. I put a wire down in here, put the relay in, and sure enough, that's a 12 volt switch source. So that's what we're going to use to power the controller. I'm rigging up the wires now, and of course that's going to be our ground. That's a great source for it. So if you come over here, show you what I have going on for the controller. Have the soldering gun heating up here, and this one is going to be going to the ground location. So I had this little connector in my electrical box, and then I took this wire from one of the fuse taps that I had on hand, just a little extension here, and I'm going to solder that onto here, and then this is what's going to be into that relay. So I'm going to solder this end onto here, and then this is going to be smushed under that relay. So you put this under, put that relay in, and you give it a few tugs and see if it's in there securely. This is what it looks like all wired up. Have the power wire there, ground wire. And I use double-sided tape to stick the receiver here onto whatever this is, the wheel well. So got this line running from the receiver down here. I used a flathead screwdriver to pry up this cover here, down here, because it's tight to fit the wire through. So stick a flathead through there, pry it up, then you can stick that wire through down here. Now let's start the car and see if these valves work. Hell yeah, everything works. Valves work. I went under there and checked for leaks. No leaks currently. I'm very surprised at that. So I'm gonna get the car back together. Gotta get the skid plate, X-brace back on, trunk put together, and then we'll go for a test drive. All right, it's been a week with the ECS valved exhaust, and actually the stock exhaust is back on the car. So I ended up putting the stock exhaust back on here. I didn't like the tone of the ECS exhaust. So with the valves closed, it was still a little bit too loud on light acceleration, you know, below 3,000 RPM. Above 3,000 RPM, it was pretty good. So on the highway, with this car being a manual, I would sit above 3,000 RPM or right around it, and it was fine. No drone, wasn't bad, but stop and go, going from stoplights just around town, it was just a little bit too drony. Then with the valves open, below 3,000, it was crazy drone. Over 3,000, it sounded pretty good, but it just wasn't it. It was not the right tone. It was a little bit too trumpety, especially below 3,000. Over 3,000, not bad, but just not the best tone. So, you know, you don't really get the best of the both worlds with the valved exhaust. Closed, you really want it to be almost like stock. When the valves are closed, maybe a little bit louder. That's the whole reason you get the valved exhaust. But in this case, it just wasn't it. And then with the valves open, it wasn't like a glorious sound that, you know, you have to have, worth it for the drone with the valves closed.
it just wasn't really it. So I put the stock exhaust back on. Call me a grandpa if you want. I just want something quiet, easy to commute in. Now I wish there was the best of both worlds. That's what I thought I was getting with the valved exhaust. Just don't feel like wasting money on another one. I think I'll stick with the stock exhaust, roll with that. Maybe I'll do a resonator delete. I know they do like a center resonator delete with an X pipe. That might help the sound a little bit, but we'll see. For now, we'll rock the stock exhaust and go from there. We got a lot more planned for this thing. Got some oil leaks I still have to fix up front. I've replaced the oil filter housing gasket. I haven't posted a video on that just yet, but replace that. Still looks like it's leaking, so I think valve cover gaskets are next, and then maybe upper timing chain cover gaskets, or reseal those. So we got a few other things to work through. Right now I'm just enjoying the car, and we'll figure out what mods are next. All right, that's all for this video. Thanks for watching.